Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nasalli ala rasulihil kareem. So, inshallah, today is our first lesson on preparation for Salah. So, it's important that we understand that Salah, the offering of the Muslim prayer, has to be done with certain prerequisites. So, a person can't just jump in and start offering Salah. There are certain things that you have to have in place before you do them. So today we're going to talk about some of the issues regarding purity. So what does a person have to ensure before they are able to offer their salah? So in order to understand this, there's a couple of terms that we'll have to get used to because they'll come up again and again. So inshallah, I'll go through a few of them. So there are some words that are in Arabic that I'll have to use, but I'll explain what they mean anyway, inshallah. So there are two types of filth, there are two types of impurity that we have to understand. So one is real, actual impurity, visible, a person can see it. So examples of impurity are urine, stool, blood, wine, etc. These are visible impurities. So these are one category of impurities that a person has to deal with. And then there's another category of impurity which is not visible, but it's by command. It's by the understanding of the rulings of Islam based upon the Quran and the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these cannot be seen. So, for example, wudu is a type of washing that's required ablution in order to get a person into a state of purity, and ghusl, having the entire bath and washing of the entire body. So these are not based upon any, like, you can't say that there's necessarily a physical impurity there, but yet these are required. So before a person can offer his or her salah, a person must be in a state of purity, a person must have wudu. And before a person even performs wudu, they need to ensure that when they've gone to the toilet and they've passed urine or stool, that at that point they've ensured that they are cleaned properly so that they are in a state of purity in order to be able to then do the wudu and offer their salah. So a bit of attention has to be taken even when using the toilet. And this was something that people used to think was kind of funny with regards to the Muslims, that everything that they do is based upon the commandment of Allah and the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the practice of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they used to find it quite surprising because in many religions they focus on just certain acts at certain times. Whereas Islam is a way of life, it's a deen, and it encompasses everything that a person does. So we're constantly making sure that what we're doing are things that please Allah and don't break His commandments. So with regards to going to the toilet, even this act, there is guidance that's given by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding this. So when a person goes to the toilet, obviously their impurities are passing out of the body. So at that point, a person needs to ensure that the body is cleaned to a satisfactory level before the person can even perform their wudu. So how is this done? So after a person uses the toilet, then the impurities that have come out, a person needs to ensure that they're removed using one of two things. Either a person uses water, or a person can use a form of earth in order to be able to remove that impurity. And the scholars, they explain that in our day and age, toilet paper would be sufficient as well, because it's been created with the purpose of removing and absorbing impurities. So the earth that would usually be used is like a type of, you can say, it almost looks like a bit like it's like a clump, like a lump of earth that is absorbent, and therefore it's able to absorb impurities off of the body. So when a person has used the toilet, then it's important to ensure that the urine has been removed from the body, and the stool, the excrement, has been removed from the body. And in our day and age, this can simply be done by using toilet tissue to remove the urine and to remove the excrement. And a person has to take particular care to ensure that no impurities left on the body. So we can't be careless in this. And then what is greater is that then a person, after using the toilet paper to remove the impurity, then also uses water on top of that. And this will ensure that the person is completely clean. But there are occasions where water is not available. So for example, you might have stopped off at a service station, or you are at your work, or you're out shopping, and you now need to use a public toilet and you don't have access to water. So in that scenario, simply just using the toilet paper correctly to ensure that all the impurities removed would be sufficient, but better than that would be that a person uses water. So sometimes just keeping like an empty bottle of water or a cup or something that they can take in with them to the toilet, that they can fill up with water and use, is very helpful. So when a person is going to use the toilet, what are some of the etiquettes that we have to be aware of? So we have to ensure that when we use the toilet, that it's done in a private place. So for example, in the men's toilets, there are standing urinals. So they're a problem for two reasons. One, it's not private, and the second is that a person is standing while urinating. So when standing while urinating, then there's a risk that splashes of filth will end up on the person's body and clothes. And these would have to be washed away before a person could, be in a state to be able to enter into the mosque and offer their Salah. So what is supposed to happen is that when we use the toilet, we're supposed to do it in a seated position, so that these splashes and things don't end up, on our body or on our clothes. So basically, when a person gets into the toilet, it should be a private place, and it should be somewhere where the person can be seated. It's important to bear in mind the direction of the prayer, which is known as the Qibla, which is in the direction of the Kaaba in Mecca. So the scholars explain that the Kaaba, the direction of the Qibla, are one of the signs of Allah, of this religion. So therefore, they should be honoured and respected. And when a person is going to use the toilet, then we learn from the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, from his practice, that we should not be facing towards the direction of prayer. Neither should we have our back towards the direction of prayer when we are relieving ourselves. So sometimes it happens that a person goes to the toilet and they're aware that either they'll be facing or to the back of them is the direction of prayer, and that's because the toilets were built like that. So how does a person then manage to use them in a way that they're also taking care of this ruling? Simply that you can either sit on the toilet a little bit to the side, just so that you're off of that direction ever so slightly, and you can also move your chest round in a way that ensures that a person hasn't got the front of the body facing towards the direction of the prayer or the back of their body. Something that's also important is that when going into the place where a person is going to relieve themselves, like a toilet within their house or within any other place, or a place that's used for using the toilet. So sometimes even out in the open in some places, in some parts of the world, there are places that are made for using the toilet that are not within the houses, and therefore when a person goes into those areas, it's important to ensure that any bits of writing that have the Quran, the name of Allah, the hadith, the sayings of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that they shouldn't be visible at that time. So if a person's wearing a ring or a necklace or any sort of symbol that is Islamic writing, then that should be put in the pocket, and a person can then go into that place, but it shouldn't be visible. Even better than that, is that a person doesn't take it into that place. but sometimes there's necessity to take it in, so therefore it should be covered up or put in a bag or something so that it's not visible when a person is going in to relieve themselves, because that's a place of impurity, and we don't want to be taking these pure things into these places. As we move on, we'll learn that there are certain du'as that you can read before going into the toilet and when you come out of the toilet, and particular attention should be paid that these are not read inside the room of the toilet. So unless we can be guaranteed that everything is completely clear and there's no impurities there, but obviously to be extra careful, it's better to do this outside of the toilet. Any recitations or whatever should be done, du'as should be done outside of the toilet, because we don't want to be reading these in a place where there are impurities round about us. When cleansing ourselves in the toilet, then we have to ensure that we use our left hand. Obviously, there are exceptions if there are some reason that a person cannot use their left hand, but generally in Islam, we understand that the left hand is used for those things that are dirty, and the right hand is used for those things that are clean. So for example, when we eat our food, we will use our right hand. When we touch the Quran, we will use our right hand. And we're trying to use our right hand for when we shake people's hands, etc. But when we are dealing with something that's dirty, that's filthy, or cleaning ourselves in this manner, removing impurities, then we use our left hand. So usually in most mosques and most homes, a person will have like a jug or something to wash themselves with water. So that can be held in the right hand, and then the washing part can be done with the left hand to ensure that the right hand doesn't get impurities upon it. So other things that should be taken care of is that we don't, say sometimes it's not possible to use like a purpose-built toilet. A person might be traveling somewhere, or they're walking through the woods or camping, or whatever they may be doing, and a person needs to relieve themselves. So obviously this will have to be done somewhere in the open. But even in situations like this, there are certain etiquettes that we should follow. So we should make sure that we're not using anywhere that is a public place. So for example, a footpath, a path, a road. These are places that human beings will be passing by regularly, and we obviously are not allowed to cause any harm to people. So therefore, we should ensure that we're not causing harm by having this type of filth lying around or being done in those places. Even today, nowadays in this country, even when dogs they do the toilet outside, the owners are responsible to ensure that it's picked up and it's thrown away. So we have to be careful. So these type of things are not done in places where the public will be using, because that will cause offence to them, which as a result will get us sins. Similarly, there might be things that are used for human benefit or for the benefit of animals, for example, and we have to be careful that we don't relieve ourselves in those places. So for example, under a fruit tree, because the fruits and or the vegetables will fall off onto the ground, and if a person has relieved themselves under there, then obviously the people are not going to want to be able to are not going to want to use those things that have fallen in such an impure place. Similarly, if there's a tree that has some shade and that's used for a bit of relief from people, then again you can't urinate and what's it called, excrete in these type of places. Similarly, within a well, which obviously people will be using to drink, which is disgusting, a person shouldn't do, but that would also be sinful. Or a place where water is gathered, like a dam or some sort of place like that. Again, because animals, people will be going there to use that, and imagine that they've got all that filth around about it or in it. So there's a bit of common sense, but something that has to be mentioned. Now, let's say a person has to relieve themselves in open. There are no places like public toilets or something that a person can use. So in that case, a person has to ensure that they're not seen by others. So there should be certain care taken to ensure that the person relieves himself in a place where they cannot be seen by other people. Now, if a person is going into the place now to relieve themselves, it's a place which is obviously used for relieving themselves, and it's a place where there'll be impurities. So then when we're going into that place, we go in with our left foot. Just similarly, like we use the left hand for dirty things, we use the left foot for entering into dirty places, and we use the right foot for going into places that are pure and beautiful, like the masjid. So that's something to bear in mind. Before we go into that place, we read the dua, "O Allah, I seek protection in you from male and female devil." And this should be done before a person enters into that place, because we're obviously reading the name of Allah. When coming out of the toilet, a person should use their right foot to leave, because they're coming out of an impure place into a clean, pure place. And they can read the dua when they leave. "O Allah, I seek your pardon. All praises are due to Allah, who has taken away from me discomfort and granted me relief." So this covers basically the process of using the toilet and ensuring that we are now clean and pure, and we can now progress on to the next part of our purity. So what I want to cover now is the ablution, the wudu. So I mentioned earlier that there is filth. There is filth which is which we understand as an impurity because of a ruling. So for example, where we have to perform wudu and ghusl, having the bath. And there is also the certain impurities that are just impure that we can see with our eyes, like for example, urine and stool and these type of things. So with regards to the impurities that are through rulings, so then they are in two categories as well. They're the minor type of impurity and the major type of impurity. So wudu is required when there is a minor type of impurity, which a person has to perform the ablution and through which they'll be rid of that minor impurity. Because it's not something physical, it's something that's given through the rulings. So in order to perform the ablution, this will be done. What can be used for that? So generally we will use water. There is a type of ablution that's called tayammum, which is a dry ablution, and this will only be used in circumstances where there's a necessity. So for example, a person needed to do wudu, there was no water, and they searched for a mile and they couldn't find water, or they knew that round about them there is no water for a mile. So in that case, they now just perform dry ablution, and that can be done for wudu, and it can be done for the compulsory bath, which we haven't covered yet. But let's just assume that we have access to water. What type of water can a person use? So any clean water is okay to be used, whether it's from the sea or from a river or from a well or from a spring or from a bottle of water or from a tap. It doesn't matter. That all of that water is fine. It can be used. If it's snow that's been melted and now turned into water, that's fine. A person can use that as well. Ice that has now become water, that can be used as well. Water can be used from a big pond or a big tank as well. There are rulings regarding how big the tank should be for ensuring that if an impurity were to fall into it, would it make all the water impure? But we're just going to at the moment skip that and just assume that it's such a big place with clean water, there's no impurities in it, so therefore we can use that water to do wudu. There's certain type of water that cannot be used. So for example, if the water has changed, so now the color has changed, the taste has changed, the smell has changed, it's become thick because there's something soaked in it, so that can no longer be used for performing wudu. Okay, and if there's a small amount of water, for example, in like a bucket, but there's a bit of impurity in it, then a person wouldn't be able to use any of that water in order to perform wudu. If someone has already used water for wudu or for having a bath, and that water was collected, that cannot now be used by someone else to perform wudu or to perform the bath. And if an animal that is haram, that is a predatory animal, if it drinks from water, for example, from a small bucket of water, that water can no longer be used. That will be regarded as impure for the purpose of wudu and for the purpose of having a bath. So now we move on to the actual process of wudu. So there is a sunnah way to do wudu, and then there is, which is the preferred way to do wudu, the way the Prophet Muhammad used to do wudu. And then there are the minimum requirements within wudu. So the minimum requirements for wudu are found within the Quran. So what are they? There are four: washing of the face, the arms, the passing of wet hands over the head, and the washing of the feet. So these 4 things, if a person does them, then they have completed their wudu, even although they haven't done it in the way that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam he showed us, but nonetheless they have met the minimum requirements. They are now in a state of wudu, and as a result they can now offer their prayer, and they can also touch the writings of the Quran and things like that. So how does a person perform wudu ordinarily then? I mentioned the 4 things, but what is an ordinary practice of how to do wudu? So first of all, you will wash your hands 3 times with water, up to and including the wrists. Then you'll take water in your right hand, you'll sort of cup your hand, and you'll take water and you'll put it into your mouth, and you'll gargle the water and spit it out, and you'll repeat this process 3 times. Obviously, if it's the month of Ramadan or if you're fasting, then you won't gargle, you'll just move the water around the mouth and spit it out 3 times, and that will be you done. Now, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to brush his teeth with a siwak, with a miswak, so that's something that we can use before we rinse our mouth out 3 times, and that will bring us extra blessings and extra reward. But remember, these that I'm going through now are more of the sunnah practice of Prophet Muhammad. So even if a person just done the bare minimum that I mentioned, the 4 things, that would be enough. But this is obviously just going on to a little bit, and we want to get a little bit of extra reward. So a person has washed their hands 3 times, they've rinsed their mouth out 3 times. Now what they'll do is they'll take, again, they'll cup water in their right hand, and they'll now put it into their nostrils, and they will then clean out their nose using the left hand, and they'll blow the nose. And this will be done 3 times. So clean water in with the right hand, and then the actual cleaning process of removing the filth with the left hand and by blowing the nose. And this is done 3 times. Then what happens is that the person will use both hands and they will gather water in their hands, and they will wash their entire face with water. And it's important that when washing the face, that it's from the top of the forehead where usually you would find the hairline. So if some man says that, you know, I haven't got hair on my head anymore, I've gone bald, so therefore I don't have to, I have to wash my entire head because there is no hairline. So obviously where you would assume the top of the forehead is and where the normal hairline should be when a person's young and normal, then that up until that point, a person must wash. And similarly underneath the chin as well. And from earlobe to earlobe, everything in between that is the face and must be washed with water 3 times in order to do it according to the sunnah, and once would just be what was mentioned earlier on, part of the compulsory. Then if a person, obviously male, has a beard, then they will do what's known as khilal. They will just wet their hand and they'll pass it through their beard, the fingers through the beard as well. So anyway, what a person would now do is, after having done the face, a person will now wash the right arm 3 times. So the right arm will be washed all the way from the fingertips, all the way up the arm, until and including the elbow. And a person will do this 3 times for the right arm, and they'll do it 3 times after that for the left arm. So the person will start with the right first, and then they'll do that 3 times, and then they'll do the left 3 times. Then after doing this, a person will do massa of the head. Massa is like to touch. So it's like taking the wet hands. So at this point, you will rinse your hands with water, but you will not cup the water and throw it over your head. You will just rinse your hands with water. So your hands will be dripping wet, and then they will be passed over the person's head. And this can be done in a way that a person ensures that it passes over their head, they're able to clean their ears and the back of their neck, which is known as the nape. So this can be done in a certain manner, and as a result, so with one wiping, a person can wipe all 3 of these things with one, and that's it done. So there's not 3 times for the head. Everything else is 3 times up until now, and after this as well. But the only thing that's done once is the wiping over with the massa of the wet hands over the head, and a person can include their ears and their neck as well. And then the last point that a person has to do is washing of both of the feet. So a person will start with the right foot and they'll wash the entire foot. up and until and including the ankles, 3 times of the right foot first, and then 3 times of the left foot. And once a person has done that, they have now performed wudu properly. They can now, if they're in a wudu area which doesn't have any impurities run about it, they can read the second kalima, the kalima of shahada. And if they are maybe in the bathroom and that's run about a toilet and there's impurities and stuff, then a person will wait till they come out of the toilet and then they can read that, inshallah, and they can get lots of reward. So there are certain things that will break a person's wudu. So these are important to know. So then a person can know when they have to repeat this wudu. So remember, the wudu is something that you can't see it go. It's just through rulings that certain things will happen that make wudu a requirement. So what are they? So if a person discharges urine or stool or anything that comes out from the private parts, this will automatically mean that a person has to perform their wudu again. So that's quite simple and straightforward. If a person breaks wind, then this breaks a person's wudu also. If a person vomits a mouthful of vomit, this will break a person's wudu. They'll have to repeat the wudu. If someone falls asleep while lying down or resting against something for support, then that person's wudu will break. So there are examples of where a person can be seated in such a way that they're not leaning against anything. They're just seated on their backside, sitting on the ground. Their hands and back are not leaning against anything. Their head is not leaning against anything. They're just sitting in that position with maybe their arms on their lap, and they were to fall asleep. Then in that situation, a person's wudu would not break. But if they were to lean on something, or they moved over, or they were lying on the ground, then this would break a person's wudu, sleeping in that condition. If a person faints, becomes unconscious, then a person's wudu is broken. And obviously, like this, going to sleep and the being unconscious is because, why does that break the wudu? Because a person's not aware that during that time, their wudu may have broke in another way and they're not aware of it. So that's why the ruling applies to them with regards to that. If a person were to lose their mind and become insane, then this is similar to the person who's unconscious, because they're no longer aware of what they're doing, and their wudu would also break. Laughing aloud in the prayer. So this is something that is taken from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he was once leading a group of people in prayer, and someone fell, and the people, they started laughing loudly in the prayer. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had to inform them that they had to perform their wudu again. And they had to offer their salah again, obviously, because their wudu wasn't there. So this is important. If a person's already in salah and they start laughing in a way that is audible, like audible to a person round about them, then in this way a person would have to perform their wudu. Let's say a person was just smiling but they were not laughing, then in that case the wudu would not break. The last one is that if blood or any matter flows from the body, so a person got a cut and the blood started to flow, or pus started to flow from a wound, or things like this, any type of matter starts to flow from the body, this breaks a person's wudu, and the wudu would have to be redone. So these are the things that break a person's wudu. Now, there are a couple of things to bear in mind. So when a person, is doing wudu, the shaitan will always try and cause you problems. The shaitan tries to stop us from believing in Allah and accepting Islam. So we've managed to do that. Now, the next thing is he tries to stop us from offering the acts of worship and obeying Allah's commandments and to break them. So we refuse to do that. Now we're worshipping Allah. So now the shaitan doesn't just say, the devil doesn't just say, right, that's it, I'm going to give up on this person. They continue to pester and annoy the person. So one of the things is that doubts start to creep into a person's mind. So a person performed wudu, they can remember doing wudu, but they're not sure if they broke their wudu or not. So by not being sure, by being in doubt, this will mean that the person still has their wudu. Because doubt doesn't break your wudu. There has to be certainty, because they're certain that they did their wudu, but they're not certain that the wudu broke. So in that case, they go with what they're certain about, which is that they still have their wudu. Okay? Now, say a person did offer their prayer and then remembered later that they with certainty that they broke their wudu. They remember now that, oh, I did go to the toilet, for example, and I passed urine or whatever. Now, in that case, that's different, because now there's certainty that the wudu had been broken. A person will do the wudu again and offer the salah, for example. But in the situation where a person is not sure if they've broken their wudu, but they were sure that they'd done their wudu, then automatically the person will go with the fact that they have their wudu. So these are important, because this can put a person off of offering the prayer and, reading Quran and touching the Quran and other things like this. So we don't want to get caught up in that. That's the ruling, and we just follow it. Once a person has done their wudu and they have now finished their wudu and they start to get doubts that, did I wash every part? I can't remember now. I'm not sure. Did I wash my head? Like, did I pass water over my head? Did I wash my arm? What did it? And they're not sure. Again, they were sure when they were doing wudu, but now they're not sure after it. So we will automatically assume that they've done everything correctly, and they do not repeat that part of their wudu. Now, if they're certain that, yes, definitely, I remember that I missed out a certain part of my wudu, then all they need to do is go back and perform that part of the wudu. They don't have to repeat the entire wudu again. So, for example, a person forgot to wash their feet and remembered. So now they will go and they'll wash their feet and they will have their wudu now. They don't have to go and repeat the whole process again. Now, if the thing that the person missed was not a compulsory part of wudu, then that doesn't matter anyway. They still have wudu. So, for example, a person, they'd done all the sunnah of wudu, but they forgot to rinse their nose or wash their mouth out. It's not compulsory to do these things anyway, so a person will automatically still have wudu, so there's nothing to worry about in that. The 4 things that are compulsory are the face, the arms, the head, and the feet. So as long as one of those things were not missing, the person's okay. So if the person's in doubt after doing wudu, then they ignore the doubt. But if they're certain that they missed a certain part, and that part was a compulsory part, the face, the arms, the head, and the feet, then they simply go and wash that part of the body and they've got their wudu. There's no need to worry about things too much. Wudu is important because in order to touch the writing of the Quran or to hold a mushaf, a book of the Quran, it's important that you have to have wudu in order to do this. So that's why in order to offer your salat, for it to be accepted, you must have wudu. And there are other acts where you have to have wudu, like, for example, if you go on Umrah and you're performing the tawaf and things like that, you need to be in a state of wudu as well. So wudu is very important to remember. This one is important as well, this ruling. When it comes to nail polish creates a barrier between the nail and the water. And as I mentioned, that the face, the arms, the head, and the feet are part of the compulsory parts of wudu. So the nail is part of the arm because it's part of the hand. And therefore, if the water isn't able to get to it, a person will not have wudu. So women are not allowed to wear nail polish and then do their wudu over their nail polish. The nail polish has to be removed completely in order for a person to perform the wudu. And also later on, we'll talk about even to perform the compulsory bathing as well. Very important. There are some products that are put out there as wudu friendly and these type of things. Scholars have done research into them and found that that's not the case. The water has to run over that part of the body. So therefore, it's not enough that it just becomes like a little bit absorbent. So for example, if a woman wants to really color her nails, then she can use henna or things like this, which is fine because that leaves a stain, but it's not waterproof. There's no barrier that's been created. But with regards to nail polish, then that would have to be removed for a person to perform their wudu. With a person that's got a light beard, where you can see the skin through the beard, then the man has to ensure that the water gets right up to the skin. But if a person's got such a thick beard that you can't see the skin through the beard, then in that case, the person doesn't have to make sure that the water gets to those parts that are underneath the beard of the skin. They would obviously do what's known as khilal, which I explained, which is passing the wet fingers through the beard, and obviously they would wash their face properly. Long nails are also not good because it gets the dirt stuck under them and it's against the practice of Prophet Muhammad. So even women have to cut their nails short. And we should avoid things that are smelly as well, like raw garlic and onion, because we're going to go into a masjid and it will smell. and cigarettes and things. So may Allah give us ability to practice this. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.